Number 1, solve and graph the equation. So the first thing we got to look for is what numbers have an absolute value of 35. Now, absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. The two numbers that have an absolute value of 35 are 35 and negative 35. So we got to write two equations. So drop the absolute value bar and write two equations of 7t equals negative 35 and 7t equals 35. From there, solve both equations. For the left one, you divide both sides by 7 and you'll get t equals negative 5. For the second equation, also divide by 7 on both sides and you'll get t equals 5. So your two answers are going to be negative 5 and 5. So let's graph them. So first, type in negative 5 and 5, separate it with a comma. Okay, now our graph is simply going to be two closed-in circles because we have two answers and the answers are just them. It's not the points between them. So just negative 5 and 5. So A will be your graph for this one. And that's the answer for number 1. Number 2, we are solving and graphing the equation. So the first thing we need to do is get the absolute value term by itself. So we first add 10 to both sides. So doing that gives me an absolute value of x equals 9. So now what two numbers give you an absolute value of 9? That would be 9 and negative 9. So your answers are going to be 9 and negative 9. So let's type that in and graph it. So type in negative 9 and 9. And then the graph, like number 1, would just be two closed circles because we have x equaling those 2 points. So meaning just those points are going to be on the graph. So A again for 2, and that's going to be the answer. Number 3, we have to get the absolute value term by itself first. So to do that, subtract 7 on both sides first, and we get the absolute value of 3n minus 9 equals negative 4. Now we know absolute value is distance, and we cannot have a negative distance, so that means the answer for number 3 is going to be no solution. And that's number 3. Number 4, what are the solutions of absolute value of 9n is greater than 36, and then graph them. So when we have a greater than with the absolute value, that means it's going to be a disjunction or statement. So we're going to have two separate inequalities. The first one, you switch the direction of this inequality and make this negative. So we'll have, without the absolute value bar, 9n is less than negative 36, and then or just rewrite what's here without the absolute value, 9n is greater than 36. Now solve both inequalities. First, for the first one, divide both sides by 9, you'll get n is less than negative 4. Now we solve the second one by dividing both sides by 9, and we'll get n is greater than 4. So the solutions are all the values of n less than negative 4, and all the values of n greater than 4. So let's type that in and graph it. So looking at our choices, seeing as there's no line under the inequality, here there's not going to be a line under the inequality in our answer. So it has to be C and not A. Now our graph, we have two open circles because there's no lines under the inequality going in separate directions at negative 4 and 4. So the only one that pertains to that is A. So the answer for 4 for the graph is going to be A. Number 5, we're solving the equation. So we got to get the absolute value term by itself first. So add 3 to both sides. You'll get the absolute value of 2x equals 12. Now the two numbers that have an absolute value of 12 is 12 and negative 12. So write two equations. You have 2x equals negative 12 and 2x equals 12. Now you simply solve both of them. Divide both of those by 2 in the first equation. You'll get x is negative 6. Divide both sides of the second equation by 2. You'll get x equals 6. So your answer is going to be negative 6 and 6 for number 5. Number 6, it says solve the equation. So we have to get the absolute value term by itself. So we first add 1 to both sides, which gives us 6 times the absolute value of 6y minus 5 equals 12. Now, to get the absolute value by itself, you have to divide both sides by 6 because you cannot distribute a number inside the absolute value. So dividing both sides by 6 gives you 6y minus 5 equals 2. You got to think of what two numbers have an absolute value of 2. That is 2 and negative 2. So write two equations, being 6y minus 5 equals 2 and 6y minus 5 equals negative 2. Now make sure, before you start solving for y, that you write the two equations first. Don't do it before then. So now we're going to add both sides by 5 in the first equation. We'll get 6y equals 3. Divide both sides by y, you'll get y equals 1/2. Do the same thing for the second equation. Add 5 to both sides, you'll get 6y equals 7. Divide both sides by 6, you'll get y equals 7 over 6. So y equals 1/2 and y equals 7 over 6 for the answer for number 6. Number 7. Starting from 100 feet away, your friend skates towards you and then passes you. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. Her distance d from you in feet after t seconds is given by the equation d equals the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. At what time is she 60 feet from you? So let's write down our equation. D equals distance, so we know d is going to be 60, so let's replace d with 60. Now we're looking for the values of t to give you a distance of 60. So we're just solving the absolute value equation. So the two numbers that have an absolute value of 60 is 60 and negative 60. So write 100 minus 20t equals negative 60, and 100 minus 20t equals 60. Start by solving the equation on the left by subtracting 100 on both sides. You'll get negative 20t equals negative 160. Divide both sides by negative 20, you'll get t equals 8. Doing the same thing for the second equation, subtracting 100 from both sides, you'll get negative 20t equals negative 40. Divide both sides by negative 20, you'll get t equals 2. So the two times that will give you a distance of 60 would be 8 and 2, and that's the answer for number 7. Number 8, your test scores in one class are 79 and 83. What possible scores can you earn on your next test to have a test average between 81 and 87 inclusive? Now, inclusive means that your test averages can include 81 and 87. Inclusive sounds like include. So first write down 81 and 87. Now, since it includes them, our inequality will be less than and equal to and less than or equal to. Have the equal to there in the line under it because inclusive means equals to. Now, to find the average of something, you add up all the numbers and then you divide by the number of numbers there are. The total number of tests are 3. We have these two here plus our possible score for the third test. So we have 79 plus 83 plus x, and we divide them by the number of tests, which is 3. So 79 plus 83 plus our third test, all divided by 3, would be between these two numbers. So now we solve that compound inequality. So cross the 3 out and multiply it to both sides. So 3 times 81 is 243, and 87 times 3 is 261. Add up 79 and 83, you get 162. Now subtract all parts by 162, you'll get 81 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 99. So that's going to be the answer. It's going to be between 81 and 99, and that's number 8.